On this edition of City Profile, I'll be talking with Police Chief Brandon Barnhill. Stay with us. Hello and welcome to City Profile. I'm Tom Butler, and on today's show we have a real treat. We have the Police Chief of the Paducah City Police Department, Chief Brandon Barnhill. Thanks for coming and talking to us today.
Appreciate the invitation.
It's been a long while since I had any of the police chiefs on the program. So what I'd like to do to start off with is just have you give me a little history of your history in the police department.
Sure.
And kind of what's going on today in police work.
All right. I grew up here locally, and I grew up in Metropolis, actually just right across the river here from Paducah. I spent my entire life in Paducah with Corey League activities. You know, I ate pizza at the Dairy Queen, went to the drive-in on the south side, those type things that a lot of people remember from the older days. But left, went to Murray State, began my career there, or began my education there, and about my junior year, I got hired at the Murray Police Department. Working a midnight shift, and then got into as a dispatcher, and then got into an officer position following after that shortly. And that put my educational career as second fiddle at that point, and put it to the back burner. I wouldn't recommend that, but it did. It just so happened it worked out that way, and things change. I realized that education was important to me, and I went back and followed that up in 2007 and completed my bachelor's degree. I went on and finished my master's degree at that point, and in October of '98 I got hired by the Paducah Police Department to kind of come back home. Murray's not too far away, but all my family was here, my wife's family was here, and so to get back home and work for the police department where you grew up was kind of a neat venture for me, and jumped on it. And has just been a whirlwind since I got here in '98, and been very successful at it, and just a great department.
Did you always want to be a police officer?
I really didn't. I didn't really find my niche in law enforcement until about my sophomore year in college. I had some good friends in Murray that were in law enforcement, and they kind of took me in, and it was hook, line, and sinker at that point. And I just loved the atmosphere. I loved the job. I loved the aspect of serving the community. And being able to provide and give back. So it was just something that seemed to be a natural fit for me.
Well, you're really young for a police chief, at least I think so.
Yeah.
39 years old.
Yes, sir.
And you don't know of any younger people in your position yet. You say you're researching
that? No, we're
that?
researching that. Our historian's looking into it. The department historian is. I don't know of anybody on record younger. But that's I'm not going to allow that to be a detriment to the department or myself. We're going to use that as a positive thing, and use the energy that comes with that, and push the department forward.
And you also mentioned that you're pretty much a homegrown product of Paducah, Metropolis, and Murray.
Right.
The last few is it chiefs or chiefs?
Chiefs.
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 Okay, that have been in Paducah, they've hired from outside the area.
Right.
Why do you think, obviously you were the most qualified candidate, but is that a good thing that we're able to hire from within? I would think that you would think so, but that has not been the case for several years in Paducah.
Right. It's a great thing. It sends a message all the way from the top seat in the department all the way down to the new officer that's coming in. As a striving new officer, you always want that possibility of rising to the top in any business that you're in. When that, so to speak, that rug is kind of pulled out from underneath you for whatever reason, then you kind of get a little bit jaded. You kind of wonder if that department will give you those opportunities in the future. So this sends that message that it is possible to get back to having a chief that rises through the ranks within a department to the top level. And I don't fault those decisions in the past. At the point where the department stood at that time, those decisions weren't bad decisions. Were the right people, those people that were picked were the right people at that time. So we're much better for those chiefs in the past doing what they did and being in the position that we are. But I'm very thankful today that as the internal candidate that the city commission and a city manager chose to go inside very capable people, not only including myself but others, to manage and run this department. And I think you'll see that as time goes on.
Well, certainly I can see the advantage of having someone from inside because you come in knowing the department.
Right.
The only disadvantage I can see is maybe are there folks that might not be happy that a young man is now the head of the department. Did you have any resistance to when you were hired?
There was absolutely zero resistance, and I don't know. I'm not naive to think that some may have wanted a different candidate or wanted the department to go outside, but I think they understand that who I am. They know me. They've been around me for years. They know what I stand for. They know how I operate, and they know kind of what my quirks are, so to speak. So it's oftentimes better that you can deal with the known versus having somebody come in from the outside and dealing with the unknown. So I haven't had that first bit of resistance. We've got a great staff, a great department. I'm looking, the sky's the limit, so to speak. I'm looking forward to what future holds for us.
Well, I think that myself included and many people that may be watching today, we don't really know what a police chief does. I know you're the head of the department. Take us through a day, and I know there's probably not a typical day for you.
Right. What I would describe as my typical day and what my belief and what my role is to be the head of the agency. And what that means to me is that I am the face of the department. A little bit, maybe a little bit different philosophy from other chiefs, but I feel like it's my position to be in the community, to be attentive to the community needs, to listen to the vibe coming from the community on what the department should or should not be doing. I have two very strong assistant chiefs that manage the day-to-day operations of the department. I can walk out of my office at any given day and be gone for several hours and not have that first worry that everything's going to be covered, knowing that if I need to be contacted or if I need to be caught up to something that's actively going on, that I'll get that phone call. So it's a very comforting feel to know that with my philosophy, it's going to work, that I have competent people below me that can handle any situation that comes up. Below the assistant chiefs are their captain levels. We have some of the best captains in this region of the state. I would put them up against anybody as far as any task that's given to them with a little bit of instruction, a little bit of guidance on where we want it to go to. They just take it full steam ahead and they produce a finished product, and that's all I can ask for is completed work. So
your philosophy is more community relations.
I feel like that's the role of the chief, is to be the face in the community and listening out in the community more so than being hands-on inside the department.
Okay.
There'll be some philosophical changes, some structural changes that will come and evolve in the department that I will be actively involved in. However, I may not be there for every piece of the puzzle, so to speak, as it develops and builds.
It's hard to be a police officer, I would assume. Mentioned this before the program, and as you work with your guys, do you find it difficult sometimes, because a lot of times the people that you necessarily deal with are people that may have committed crimes?
Correct.
Is it hard when those are the people that you deal with daily to keep a positive attitude and maybe get jaded a little bit, that everybody is like that, and how do you deal with that inside of being a police officer?
Well, it's kind of a natural progression as a young officer to get jaded very quickly, to understand that you're always dealing with that aspect of the public that is always doing wrong. And what you have to keep in perspective, and a lot of our senior officers will talk to the younger ones, you have to keep in perspective that we're only dealing with a small portion of the community that we serve. All too often we're dealing with them on multiple times a week or multiple times a day, type situations, but we're only dealing with that small portion. A lot of the people that pay the taxes that fund the police department and several other things don't require anything from us. They don't necessarily need a service from us, and very seldom do they have interaction with us. But we reiterate that to the officer, that there are not, the community as a whole is not bad. The small picture that they see day in and day out is not a reflection of our entire community. So we ask them to be involved. We ask them to go out and deal with charity or work with charities. We ask them to go out and be involved in youth athletic leagues, so to speak, and to see a positive image of our community, and to have that balance within them, so they'll not lose sight of what they should be, and that our community is great.
That just seems like it would be a tough part of policing.
It is. It is. And as you mature and as
mental
you
aspect.
Right. Very very good point. But as you mature and as you kind of deal with that, then you come to get a little better understanding, and it's not as hard the longer you stay in this career.
Well, let's look at, you've provided me with some information about crimes in Paducah.
Right.
And you've listed a couple of different types that people might not know this is how you list it. But before I do that, you mentioned a term that I'd like for you to talk about called data-driven policing.
Data-driven policing, correct.
What is that, first of all?
It's not, excuse me, it's not a huge change from what we used to do as far as policing. We provide the service. We target the areas of crime that we know are there. Kind of the trend over the last several years has been to take the data, statistical data, to drive and push your forces to where you need them. And we can break that down to the type of crime. We can break it down to the hour of the day. We can break it down to the day of the week. If you want to talk about collisions, if you want to talk about a particular type of crime, we can show you, it's almost like using the old push pins on the map. Mm-hmm. Now it's all computer aided, and it's data driven within, the stats go into the computer, and then it produces these models that we drive, or we use to drive our resources. And that those assignments may change day to day. We usually base that on Part 1 crimes, and those Part 1 crimes are anywhere from anything from a theft of $500 or above, all the way up to homicide. And a lot of that is retail theft. A lot of our Part 1 crime stats, 1,245 for 2013 versus 1,376 for 2012. We have a great reduction in that, but a lot of that 1,245 is still the retail theft market. And we're trying to do a little better on grabbing a hold of that and seeing how we can handle that.
Well, it looks like you had over 50,000 calls.
50,000 calls for service this past year in 2013.
And how big is the department? How much manpower do you have?
We have 78 allotted officers. We currently have 74 with some pending retirements. So we're going through a current transition right now, but we try to manage the best we can with 74.
That seems like a lot of calls.
That is. Our officers are constantly busy. There's not much downtime.
And so you get a call, you send somebody out, that information eventually makes it into a computer. Do you have a person, like here at the college, we have people that deal pretty much only with the data.
Right.
They tell us what's going on, and that way we can adjust what we're doing based on the data. Is that similar to how it works?
That's correct. We have an investigative assistant that does our crime analysis for us. We'll take the data and put it into the computer models and reproduce that out to the staff so we can use that to drive how our resources are going to be modeled for that day or for that month.
Interesting, just talking about your resources. How long have we had a SWAT team?
We've had a SWAT team since about 96, 97. Chief Kermit Perdue reinstituted that whenever he was there. It is not a full-time SWAT team as you would see in larger departments. However, it is a very dedicated SWAT team, very professionally trained. They have a lot of the state-of-the-art equipment. It's one of those utilized resources that we hope that we never bring out of the, if you've got the toolbox, it's the tool that's in the bottom that you never use. But unfortunately in today's society, you've almost got to have some of those avenues to be able to address things that come up whenever they do.
Is the SWAT team something that people compete to be on? Do you get promoted into that? How would you move into that? Well, it's not full-time, you said, but how do you become a part of that team? Right.
There is a testing and a selection process. They have to go through a physical fitness test that's hosted by the senior SWAT members. Very rigorous test. Usually leaves a few of them, wondering why they went through the test. But it's meant to be challenging because that's not an easy job. At that point, whenever the physical fitness test is accomplished or they pass that, they move on to an oral interview. Combined with their past work history, their evaluations and those type things, we try to paint a full picture of who that employee is and at that time, make those selections.
And then once they're selected, they get special training?
They do. Our particular SWAT team trains twice a month. In addition to that, the newly selected officer is sent to a specialized training course, either 40 or 80 hours, and then they receive some specialized training throughout the course of the year whenever it comes up. we try to pair up with our military partners on some of that and use their facilities and those type things.
I know that I believe that the SWAT team was a part of a drill that we had here at the college not too long ago, and you brought out a big vehicle.
Correct.
It's fairly new, isn't that? What's it called, first of all? The big, it looks like a tank almost.
Right. The title of it is, or the acronym is MRAP, M-R-A-P. It's Mine Resistance Armored Protected Vehicle. That is part of a process through the military. It's called their DRMO. It's their demobilization of their equipment. They've went through that over several years through generations of the military. And what they do is whenever they decommission a piece of equipment, they put it out to their law enforcement counterparts in the civilian world. And it's something that we can get for free, get our hands on for free. We pay $0 for that. We only have to pay maintenance. And the piece of equipment that we especially targeted, this one that we received, was in the best condition that we could find. We have not done that first thing to it. I think we've changed a light bulb in it. Put a little bit of gas in it, and we've done some training on our officers to do that. But it's not costing the taxpayers $0. It's not costing them anything. And I've had this question posed to me, and it's very interesting to me. And I understand the concern from the public of why do we need that here. Unfortunately, we've had a shooting at a high school here. Unfortunately, there are instances that come up from time to time in which the officers need more protection. I explained it to a gentleman the other day at church, and I said, I hope that truck never gets out of the garage. And he said, well, why do you need it? I said, because it's that one instance and when we do need it, that if it's something that's available to us, a tool in the toolbox, so to speak, we have that available and we can push that out there. And if we can protect our officers and have a better resolution to the incident, then that's what my job as a chief is.
Could you tell me a scenario in which it might be used?
There are several scenarios. You can all the way up to a school shooting, a mall shooting, which we read about daily in the newspaper anymore or on the media. We see that, unfortunately. It could be a hostage situation in which the officers have to communicate. That's not necessarily just for SWAT members. Our hostage negotiators use that from time to time to be able to have a secure area to use their equipment to be able to contact someone inside of a residence or a business that's held up for whatever reason, just to have that communication and to talk them down, to de-escalate the situation.
It'd get my attention.
It does.
I bet it does. Here's a part of your team that I don't want to be on, the bomb squad.
Right, yes.
Do people volunteer for that?
We have officers that are very, very interested in that, yes. We have a 4-member squad. It's fully funded by federal funds. We have $1 million worth of equipment in a vehicle and a trailer. We have 3 robots. All that $1 million of equipment is federally funded.
Nice.
There again, the taxpayers do not pay a dime of that. We pay for the staffing to do that. They're a regional team. They cover 13 counties in western Kentucky. They're often pooled. A classic example of that is for the Kentucky Derby. Whenever the regional bomb squad teams that would house or that would cover that area are busy, our team will shift over and will cover a larger portion, say 26 counties. So it's something that we provide as a service to the state, provide here locally in our community, and it's ironically they're used quite often, more than you would think so, and it's just on suspicious packages, suitcases or briefcases left at the post office, those type situations that we've had here in our small town community. We have them, and we have to be able to respond to them.
It's just another one of those things that is good to have if you need.
It is. It's another tool in our toolbox, and there again, we hopefully never need it, but we're capable of responding to it if we do.
Another one of your tools is your K9 unit.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit about that.
We have 3 canines within our department, and they're stretched out over in our patrol division. They're stretched out over different shifts. Those 3 canines are some of the best dogs that I've ever seen. Their temperaments are wonderful. The handlers that handle them are hand-picked, selected for their personalities and their demeanors and how they can, and their operating style. That's a unique bond, that officer has to be able to handle his job and situation and also control the partner that's behind him, So it's having a multitasking function to that the officer has to be able to handle.
I think that I always think that's really cool.
Yes.
So you say you have 3?
We have
and
3.
do you run 3 shifts? Is that,
We do,
Is that
yes.
what you do? A morning, afternoon, and overnight, or something like that?
That's exactly correct. And we have a couple alternative shifts. We have a flex squad that adjusts their shift, and we have a traffic unit also.
And that's not all you do. I mean, you have 78 staff, and those are officers,
That's
sworn staff.
78 sworn. Yeah, we have
Sworn
nine,
staff.
9 civilian staff.
And a pretty big budget.
We do.
It says here $9 million.
$9.1 million. About 87% of that, unfortunately, is consumed in personnel costs.
Right.
So that's one of the problems or the challenges. I won't say a problem, but a challenge for us to balance out moving forward.
I think that one of the probably things that you focus on, but you can tell me if this is true or not, is that all police officers need training. And if your world is anything like my world, the technology changes almost daily.
It is daily.
And so you have to keep up with that training. There's some pretty impressive statistics that you provided me on hours of training, over 6,800 hours of training. You've got some that you have to do.
Correct.
And rifleman's training. I mean, just a lot of stuff.
Correct.
Talk to me about your philosophy of training.
Well, our philosophy is that, you know, our officers, as you mentioned, you know, the paradigm of law enforcement is changing daily, if not hourly. Our officers have to be able to handle anything, you know, from the minute traffic collision or the traffic stop, the speeding ticket, those type things, all the way up to an active shooter incident. And, you know, we try not to beat that term to death as tools in the toolbox, but we do have to provide those resources to the officer. If we're asking them to handle a situation, then they have to be trained in that. They have to have the resources to be able to do that. As you mentioned, we have over, last year in 2013, we had over 6,800 hours of individual police training for each officer. Some of that's mandated by the state. They have 40 hours that they have to attend each year, hosted by the state, and a lot of that's done in-house. We provide annual firearms training, taser training. You know, one of the unique things that we do here at Paducah is driver's training. If you look at statistics across the nation and across our state, the most common factor of injuring an officer is driving. And so we know that. We know that we have our fair share of incidents that pop up here, but we feel like it's our due diligence to provide that training to make our officers safer and better whenever they do drive, and when they have to respond to something fast.
Here's something that looks interesting to me that I have no idea. Maybe I have an idea. Verbal judo.
Verbal judo.
What is
correct.
that?
Well, that's just addressing and handling things and speaking to people as they would want to be spoken to.
Okay.
You know, as you know, you can often draw more flies with honey than you can anything else. We teach our officers to ask or phrase their question to get the answer that they want. You know, if you think about it any given day that you can think of a question, and there's probably several different ways you could ask the question, and maybe elicit several different responses. Whenever we approach a car or whenever we're dealing with somebody on the street, if we're looking for a particular response favorable to us, like getting a driver's license or asking them if they've done something, committed a crime, whatever the case may be, we're going to phrase and ask that question in the manner that is best suited to get a response that we're looking for.
Just communications training.
It is
much.
communication skills, and that's a problem facing society moving forward.
One of the things that you hear most in the news about regarding policing and police officers is their use of force.
Correct.
And you have a slide here about use of force, and I found it interesting that that's anything above a normal handcuffing.
Correct.
Is considered force of some type.
Correct.
How do you deal with those kind of issues?
Well, you know, we've changed the terminology a little bit on that, and use of force is still what it's referred to most often, but it's response to resistance. You know, when resistance is provided to us by the individual on the scene, how we respond to that is up to the officer. And they have several levels, which is called a force continuum. They don't have to go through every step, but they can jump from A to E, so to speak, from verbal contact all the way up to the worst case scenario of firearm use. but our officers have to be trained in doing that. A little known fact of that, of those incidents, 1.3 of all of our incidents required force on our behalf. Oddly enough, though, in those uses of force, a large percentage, a high percentage involve alcohol and drug use from those perpetrators. So, you know, their actions, they're not always thinking clearly. Their actions are skewed by the alcohol and the drugs, and you know, it's a societal problem that we just have to, as officers, we have to be able to handle.
Do you track how many of your crimes are drug and alcohol related?
We do. That's a stat that we can pull from, and we normally do in our annual report, and we produce that, but I don't have that for us today.
Is it significant?
It is, a large percentage, unfortunately. A large percentage of our crime is induced by drugs and alcohol.
We have about 2 minutes to go, and what I'd like to give you the opportunity to do is tell our viewing audience where we're going in the future. What's the Paducah Police Department going to look like in a year or maybe even 5 years?
Very good question. And you know, we think we have a vision of where we're headed to in the future, but unfortunately technology and society changes that a bit. But what I can tell you is our technology is something that we're trying to get a hold of. Those changes are daily. You see advertisement daily of how technology is changing, the newest, the latest, and the greatest of how you can communicate. Technology is really changing law enforcement specifically, of the capability of the officer in the field and how much data they can have in a split second in their hands. You know, it's not uncommon for the officer to have a full list of data on any individual that they run into, including pictures, criminal history, within a matter of seconds. It used to take hours to get that information, you know, years ago. Now it's at the tip of their fingertips. So technology is changing us. Moving forward, we don't know. We really don't know how technology is going to change us. I can tell you that it's going to be biometric. It's going to be several different areas that are going to change law enforcement as far as security. We know that more information, the better for the officer. It's going to make it safer for them whenever they're approaching vehicles. Training is a big thing for us. We are in a unique position. I have about 12 senior line officers and supervisors that can retire over the next 18 months. That is a challenge for us moving forward, specifically in the next year and next 2 and 3 years. I have to find those replacements and to get those, fast track those replacements up in training and education. So it's kind of unique, the position we're in. We have a great department. Could not be happier where we stand. You know, the ground level has been, the foundation has been laid for us, and we, fortunately, all we have to do is build upon that.
Thank you so much for coming today. I'd like to get you back sometime and talk about what you would look for in a possible recruit for a policeman.
Sure.
But I'm sorry we don't have time for that right now.
Not a problem.
And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us here on City Profile. I'm Tom Butler. Join us again next time.